Hello and welcome to Indus News Live from Islamabad. I'm HAIRDRESSER and these are the headlines. In India, the protesting farmers have called for a nationwide protest on New Year's Day to demand the repeal of new laws. Meanwhile, a Congress leader says the government should talk to farmers and take back the black laws. Farmers have been camping on Delhi borders against agricultural reforms for over a month now. Lebanon's Hezbollah says it has the capacity to strike anywhere in Israel and occupied Palestinian territories. In an interview, leader Hassan Nasrallah said the group has twice as many precision-guided missiles now as it had a year ago. U.S. President Donald Trump has signed a $2.3 trillion COVID relief and spending package into law. The move has averted a partial government shutdown on Tuesday. In a statement, Trump said he had asked Congress to reduce wasteful spending and increase paychecks to Americans. South Africa has crossed 1 million cases of coronavirus days after a new strain linked to the UK was detected there. South Korea is also the latest state to report cases of the variant. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, the virus has claimed 55 lives and infected nearly 2,000 people overnight. The nationwide death toll has risen to 9,929. Globally, there are 1.7 million fatalities and 80 million cases. And in the English Premier League, West Bromwich Albion snatched a 1-1 draw against champions Liverpool at Anfield. A late header by Semi Ajayi left the Reds frustrated and ended their hopes of stretching a menacing 5-point lead. Well, those were the headlines. More news in detail after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. And now for the news in more detail. We start from India, where the protesting farmers have called for a nationwide protest on New Year's Day to demand the repeal of new laws. Farm unions urged the public to support their struggle against contentious agricultural reforms. They also called for rallies in Patna and Thanjavur on December 29th and in Manipur and Hyderabad on December 30th. Meanwhile, Congress has decided to launch a dialogue program in Rajasthan to support the farmers. Leader Priyanka Gandhi said the government should talk to farmers and take back the black laws. More farmers from Maharashtra have joined the protest at Rajasthan-Haryana border, which has emerged as a new epicenter of the ongoing agitation. Farmers have been camping on Delhi borders for over a month now. And Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi says India is planning a false flag operation intending to destabilize Pakistan. In a statement, he said India's aggressive designs against Pakistan have been exposed for the world to see. Qureshi added that Pakistan's armed forces are fully prepared for a befitting response to any enemy misadventure. This comes a day after Prime Minister Imran Khan said India is fanning terrorism in Balochistan and other areas. Last month, Pakistan presented a dossier containing details of India's state sponsorship of terrorism. Islamabad has repeatedly urged the UN and the international community to take notice of the Indian actions. And Lebanon's Hezbollah says it can strike anywhere in Israel and occupied Palestinian territories. In an interview, leader Hassan Nasrallah said the group has twice as many precision-guided missiles now as it had a year ago. Nasrallah said Hezbollah warned it would retaliate when Israel threatened to target a facility in the eastern Bekaa region. He also said the last few weeks of the Trump administration were critical and called Trump angry and crazy. Nasrallah repeated vows that Iran and its allies will avenge the U.S. killing of Qasem Soleimani. He also promised to avenge Israel's killing of a Hezbollah fighter in Syria earlier this year. Moving on, U.S. President Donald Trump has signed a $2.3 trillion COVID relief and spending package into law. The move has averted a partial government shutdown on Tuesday. In a statement, Trump said he asked Congress to reduce wasteful spending and increase paychecks to Americans. White House Deputy Press Secretary Judd Deere said a redlined version will be sent back to Congress, but the bill as signed will not necessarily be changed. Lawmakers now have breathing room to continue debating whether to revise the stimulus checks. The Democrat-led House is set to vote on the issue today. Republicans and Democrats have swiftly welcomed the president's decision to sign the bill into law. Now, South Africa has crossed 1 million cases of coronavirus days after a new strain linked to the UK was detected there. South Korea is also the latest state to report cases of the variant. Globally, there are 1.7 million fatalities and 80 million cases. More on the pandemic in this report.
The frightening surge of COVID-19 and inoculations against the virus are treating the world hand in hand at this stage of the pandemic. Brazil's Vice President Hamilton Mourão has tested positive as the country registered 344 new deaths. U.S. top infectious disease expert Anthony Fauci has warned that the holiday travel can push the country to a critical point in the pandemic, while Mexico continued its vaccination plan by focusing on doctors, nurses and soldiers.
This is very important because we have to protect those who protect us. These people, especially those in the front line, are in contact with sick people. If they get sick, two things happen. One, they can transmit the disease not only to other patients but also to their families. Second, they would stop going to work.
A new faster-spreading variant of the virus has prompted more than 50 countries to impose travel restrictions on Britain. Saudi Arabia has extended a ban on entry to the kingdom by air, land and sea for another week. Meanwhile, France, Spain, Germany and Greece have started vaccinating elderly care home residents first. South Korean officials say they will speed up efforts to launch a public coronavirus vaccination program. Elsewhere, local authorities in China are implementing strong epidemic prevention and control measures to curb the rebound and import of COVID-19 cases during the winter season.
Whereas in Pakistan, 55 people have lost their lives to COVID-19 over the past 24 hours. This pushes the country's death toll to 9,929. Health officials reported 1,974 new infections overnight. Meanwhile, there are more than 39,000 active cases in the country. The health ministry says out of 473,000 countrywide cases, more than 423,000 people have recovered. The ministry said over 211,000 cases have been detected in the Sindh province. Punjab has reported more than 136,000 cases. In the capital city of Islamabad, over 37,000 people have been infected so far. And moving on, Niger has begun counting votes from an election expected to lead to the nation's first transfer of power between two democratically elected presidents. Results are expected in the coming days. Niger voted in presidential and legislative elections amid a growing threat from militants in the region. The West African country has experienced 4 coups since gaining independence from France in 1960. The ruling party's candidate, former Interior Minister Mohamed Bazoum, is the favorite to succeed President Mahamadou Issoufou. The latter is stepping down after 2 5-year terms, leading the country of 23 million. And in the U.S. state of Tennessee, Nashville police have named the suspect in the camper van blast on Christmas Day. The blast left 3 people injured and disrupted communication systems in Tennessee and 4 other states. Officials said DNA collected at the scene matched that of 63-year-old Anthony Quinn Warner. They said Warner blew himself up in the explosion and appears to have acted alone. Public records show Warner lived in Antioch, southeast of Nashville, and his home was searched by FBI on Saturday. The FBI said there was no sign of more suspects and it was too early to suggest a motive.
Based on the evidence that we've gathered to this point, we've come to the conclusion that an individual named Anthony Warner is the bomber, that he was present when the bomb went off, and that he perished in the bombing. We base this conclusion on forensic evidence, including DNA evidence that you'll hear about, as well as evidence that was gathered at the scene of the bombing.
Now, a Florida-based U.S. serviceman has been charged in the nighttime shooting that killed 3 people in Rockford, Illinois. Winnebago County State Attorney Jay Hanley said Duke Webb was indicted for 3 counts of murder. He said the 37-year-old serviceman was also charged with 3 counts of first-degree attempted murder. Duke Webb was taken into custody shortly after the incident as he tried to conceal his weapon. Rockford Police Chief Dan O'Shea said Webb was an active military man and investigators were in touch with the U.S. Army. O'Shea said the suspect had no known ties to the victims, adding that the shooting was a random act. And preparations are underway in New York as workers begin installing a new design of the Times Square New Year's Ball. For a city struck early by COVID-19 and with a death toll near 25,000, many will welcome the chance to turn the page on 2020. This year's design is set to represent the gift of happiness. The event will be headlined by Gloria Gaynor, Jennifer Lopez, Billy Porter, and Jimmy Allen. There will be fewer than 100 people at the crossroads of the world to ring in 2021. Doctors, nurses, teachers, and other essential workers will be invited to enjoy the celebration in socially distanced pens, while everyone else watches from home. And in Russia, thousands of lights have illuminated the capital, Moscow, ahead of New Year celebrations. State media says 1,000 Christmas trees were lit and 4,000 installations set up for this holiday season. With endless decorations and lights lining its streets, Moscow transforms into a winter fairy tale during the holidays each year. This year, despite coronavirus restrictions, a huge crowd gathered to admire the lights. Around the capital's famous landmarks, including Red Square, the Kremlin, and the world-famous Bolshoi Theater, the famous gum department store has also been decked out with extravagant decorations both inside and out. And we'll be back with more news after a short break. Stay with us. We're back. The box office earnings of Wonder Woman 1984 have hit a pandemic high in a cinema and streaming showdown. The superhero franchise pulled in nearly $36.1 million at theaters worldwide over the Christmas holiday weekend.
The AT&T-owned studio Warner Brothers said around $16.7 million of the total came from U.S. and Canadian theaters. This ranks as the highest domestic box office opening since the coronavirus shuttered theaters in March. In a statement, HBO Max said the movie was also watched by millions at home in the U.S. via streaming. It said the total viewing hours on HBO Max tripled compared with a typical day. Warner Brothers has also confirmed plans for another movie in the franchise. It said the third movie will also be written and directed by Patty Jenkins and star Gal Gadot as the lasso-wielding warrior.
Archaeologists in Pompeii, the city buried in a volcanic eruption in 79 AD, have made an extraordinary find. They dug up a frescoed shop that served up the ancient equivalent of street food to Roman passerbys. More about the discovery in this report.
Archaeologists have made yet another interesting discovery in the ancient city of Pompeii. Known as Thermopolium, Latin for hot drinks counter, the shop was discovered in the Archaeological Park's Regio 5 site. Traces of nearly 2,000-year-old food were found in some of the deep terracotta jars. It contained hot food, which the shopkeeper lowered into a counter with circular holes.
This is an extraordinary find. We are in the Thermopolium of Regio 5, where excavations began 2 years ago, when we found only one side of the counter. A very beautiful counter, by the way, with a nymph riding a horse. Maybe this fresco was dedicated to a nearby fountain, because this Thermopolium was placed in front of a small square, one of the most beautiful squares of Pompeii.
The front of the counter was decorated with brightly colored frescoes. Some depict animals that were part of the ingredients in the food sold, such as a rooster and 2 ducks hanging upside down. Archaeologists also found a decorated bronze drinking bowl known as a petera. They also dug up ceramic jars used for cooking stews and soups, wine flasks, and an amphora and some bones.
Now we can start the analysis. The material inside the container to know their content, what type of food was solid, and what passers-by in Pompeii could buy, drink, food. A truly extraordinary evidence of the Mediterranean diet that we will know soon.
Pompeii was home to about 13,000 people when it was buried under ash, pumic pebbles, and dust. It endured the force of an eruption equivalent to many atomic bombs. About 2/3 of the 165-acre ancient town has been uncovered.
Amid a pandemic, a Cholita woman is lighting up the long hours of wait for her clients at a hair salon in El Alto, Bolivia. Find out how in this report.
The coronavirus pandemic has ruined people's lives in different ways. But despite all this, hairdresser Gladys Espejo welcomes her clients by dancing to the traditional music of the Cholitas. She wears the traditional high bowler hat and puffed skirt. Espejo makes a difference by being the only Cholita woman to offer styling and hairdressing services in the outskirts of La Paz.
My story begins with my grandfather because he made a foray into the art of hairdressing. Later, my father became a hairdresser 30 years ago, and I learned to cut men's hair because I cut my father's hair.
In recent years, Bolivia's Cholitas are imposing new fashion and beauty standards in a country where they were once routinely stereotyped and discriminated against after being considered maids of the middle classes.
A great majority of my clients are Cholitas who participate in different beauty contests. This makeup is important when the Cholitas show up to these events and want to win a title. Without a doubt, good makeup can cause a visual impact.
The Cholitas hail from rural Aymara and Quechua communities. For generations, they were denied entry to certain restaurants, taxis, and even some public buses.
And now on to business. With Britain and the European Union having clinched a deal, the UK is pursuing trade deals with the US, Australia, and other countries in the Indo-Pacific region. Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab said London will engage in trade deals with a huge growth market for the future. Trade Minister Liz Truss said Britain and Turkey will sign a deal that replicates the existing terms between Ankara and London. She said they expect to sign tariff-free trade agreements this week in the manufacturing, automotive, and steel industries. London has now signed trade agreements with 62 countries ahead of the end of the Brexit transition period on January 1st. The government has urged businesses to prepare for practical and procedural Brexit changes. And moving on, stocks in the Asia-Pacific are mostly trading higher as the final week of 2020 kicked off. Japan is leading the gains with Nikkei 225 and Topix Index trading up by nearly 1%. Shares in Australia also traded in positive territory with the ASX 200 up nearly 0.5%. South Korea's Kospi has edged up fractionally. Meanwhile, Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index and mainland Chinese shares have fallen below the flat line. Let's move on to sports. In the English Premier League, West Bromwich Albion snatched a 1-1 draw against champions Liverpool at Anfield. A late header by Semi Ajayi cancelled out Sadio Mane's opener, stunning the Reds. Liverpool manager Jurgen Klopp said the draw with West Brom felt like a defeat. He said the players were angry at missing the opportunity to go 5 points clear in the league. Liverpool are frustrated as they are already missing defenders Virgil van Dijk and Joe Gomez due to long-term injuries. In another fixture, Wolverhampton Wanderers scored a late equalizer against Tottenham Hotspur and drew 1-1. And Russia says a ban from officials attending international sporting events is unacceptable and unclear. The Court of Arbitration for Sport ruled to keep in force sanctions against Russia for up to 2 years. In an interview, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said Russia will draw all the right conclusions from the decision, but permission to have national symbols on sports uniforms was a relaxation compared to the 2018 Olympics. The sanctions bar Russia from sending an official delegation to the rearranged 2021 Tokyo Olympics, the 2022 Winter Olympics, and the 2022 World Cup, but allows Russian athletes to compete under a neutral banner. And now it's time to take a look at the latest weather updates from around the world. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.